Hey everyone, how's it going? For those who are meeting me for the first time, nice to meet you. My name is Eric TC. I'm an esoteric artist, and I got the opportunity to connect with Bix Weir. And we had a discussion about a couple of different topics, ranging from the idea of year zero and proactive solutions we can take to move forward from here. Not only does this actually blossom and develop a deeper understanding of who we are as individuals, but I think the conversation is going to blossom up for things to come. So I invite you to tune in and feel free to share if you are resonant with the message or if you'd like to connect it with other communities. It is an honor to be able to just offer my voice as a creative perspective in this ever changing world. So, without further ado, dive right in and enjoy.
Hey guys, Bix Weir, RoadtoRoota.com. I'm here with a very special guest, Eric TC, and we're both putting this up on our channels so we can spread the word of wherever this conversation goes. Eric, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. And just for many who have meeting me for the first time, my name is Eric TC, and I'm an artist. And I'm happy to connect with you here at Bix. And we're going to have a discussion today about a number of things occurring in real life, as well as where it could take us and solutions we could have within our own grasp and hands. Given conversations can have effect on many different people, I like to see where this can blossom because it's like a walk in nature. You never know what you expect, but after that experience, something might happen.
It sounds great. Hey, I did want to tell everybody, Eric's the guy who did the little cartoon of Bix Weir. He's done quite a few people actually in the crypto space. Great artist, and I love his work. And we had never met in virtually or in person, so we put this together to give everybody kind of a perspective of where different sides of the spectrum is coming on year zero, and that's where we want to kind of focus on year zero. And when I first heard about year zero was Cliff High's Cliff High interview. He talked about it, and he had heard of year zero through the deep web military conversations that were going, saying that 2020 was going to be year zero, and they were referring it to actually the amount of calories that were available for consumption going out into the future, and it was kind of restarting. There wasn't going to be enough calories, and that kind of lagged into everything else that has followed the crashing of the system and things like that. So what's your take on year zero? Does it have any meaning for you as far as what you've been working on and thinking about?
Well, I like to see things more as we can disconnect from the label we provide what's going on because I find that many can have a different name for a color, but that color can still get that same essence. I find year zero is a good representation, not only where we are to only restart pretty much many systems that are in shock, but to actually reinvent and offer up a new solution to not only rebuild and replace the systems that have come beforehand, but utilize technology like the blockchain or many other aspects in which we collectively and community wise build these new systems in place, whether they're coming from a locally engineered perspective or it's being inspired through internet conversations or ideas that can spread like wildfires. These things are always like the birthplace of not only innovation, but creativity for many. And without a doubt, we're in a huge shifting times where many of the world's external security is at threat, not for the fact that it's being pumped and manipulated to, I would say, hold up the illusion, but the same illusion is being challenged to see if there's an authenticity there. Is this where you want to invest in? And the big question is, where are you investing your time, energy, and understand where your sources come from? Because many of those not only are changing below your feet, but this is a time and place to actually get clear what it is you have around you, what it is you have to work with, and what can you do from it from there. Many of us are going to be taking actions for the very first time with backyard gardens and stuff like this, but I'm sure yourself, myself, we've kind of been aware of a lot of things coming on end. And whether you're looking at the sustainable movement of tiny houses or backyard gardening, or just the idea of being able to source what you can yourself, these same kind of principles are going to play a huge part in how each of us are going to take solutions into our own hands and apply what works for them. Other individuals are going to be great at connecting the community, while others are going to be working at hard, plowing their lands to make sure that they have enough food to share with those around them. Even the concept of community gardens can come together, how you can bridge two ideas and have more of a collective input instead of weight falling on a single individual. So I think we have a lot of different angles and perspectives that we can see not only this creative new start opening up like what this year zero can represent, but in the way that we can take this and go with it might just even eclipse some of the systems that have come beforehand because their very nature that they not only improve, but they show the whole world what more potential can exist rather than the limitations that previous systems have projected in the past. What's your
That,
take on all that?
that's an awesome perspective. And truthfully, um, me coming from the banking world, 25 years of banking, and then getting into exposing the banking world, at first people were saying I'm too optimistic. I'm telling them the entire complex is going to collapse, and I'm too optimistic. But
Mhm.
the key is, I mean, I struggle at times keeping it positive, keeping it so that I'm looking forward and not backwards. I'm not thinking necessarily of the destruction of the old system and how painful that is going to be, because it will be painful for the
Yes,
vast
yes.
majority of the civilized population, whatever that means, the industrialized population, the people who got used to a life that that didn't require all that much input from the person to live it, like in the United States. Just speaking from a U.S. citizen, you can get by and everything's fine, and nobody really struggles all that hard. And if you do, you're struggling with help of the government. The government's there to help everybody and bail everybody out, and so everybody's used to that being there. I think we're approaching a time where that won't be there, and we will start having to think for ourselves and how we want to create a life going forward, create a monetary system going forward, create a social system going forward. And I think it will be. I think you're right. It's the people who get to decide from here on out, as opposed to the controllers who have been deciding, who gets what up to this point, and I think up to the point of when this system falls apart ultimately, which I think we're getting real close to with the derivative market in oil just absolutely going sideways. It affects so many areas, and so many banks are going to be failing. They don't have enough money they couldn't even create enough money to bail out the system as it is. So that, to me, can be very scary, or we can look at it as an opportunity, like you're saying, to change things, to look at things in a different way. And the beauty of it all, the best part about it, the old system being destroyed, is the debt. It will be gone. The debt is the biggest problem on planet Earth right now. Nobody really thinks about it because they've been working so hard to pay that next pay the next mortgage payment, pay the next credit card bill, and they don't lift up their heads and say, wait a minute, where did this debt come from? Who created it? Who's benefiting from that type of system? And with the crashing of the derivative market, all that goes away. And we can, once again, we'll have to reallocate money and things like that. That's kind of the positive side going forward. And I think guys like you who are working on actually ways to implement a new, different type of society, at least for you and your community, and say with me and my RoadtoRoota
Mm.
community, we're talking about, okay, how can we apply cryptocurrencies? My friend Bitcoin Ben talks a lot about, hey, getting alternative sources of income and streams of income through cryptocurrencies, knowing that cryptocurrencies are going to be amazingly useful to humanity, and they don't require the old system being in place. They don't require the banking system. They don't require governments, things like that. And if you can apply that to everything in your life, it really is. I mean, year zero to me represents the brand new start. And I've been talking about it for over 20 years, how the old system's going to crash and we're going to have to get into a new system. But when it's here, it's both frightening and exhilarating. And I'm right now, I'm in the in between. I'm frightened at
Yeah,
times
yeah.
knowing what's about to happen, and I'm exhilarated about the change.
You go out to stock up on TP and you're reminded at the state of how society is dealing with many things. And then you come home and you get to your space and you realize where you are and where you stand. But like, I find that so interesting because we are very opportunistic individuals. And when we can see potential as human beings, we kind of wonder out of curiosity what can come out of that. And many of us right now, they've been, like you've stated, at this 9 to 5 job, earning a paycheck to cover the debt that is paying for them to go back to work so that they can come home for those few hours and just enjoy just to wake up and do it again. And this cycle has lost generations of individuals of knowing who they are or what they're capable of. And for the first time in probably who knows how long, many people are actually starting to just take a breath and realize where they are. And they take a sniff and they're like, what's that smell? To find out that the shit below their shoes is what they've been standing in. So now it's time to actually recognize and start to like take proactive actions in which we can actually start to clean things up, to become what we're aware of where we can. It's not going to happen overnight. And just with any individual, you're going to have your own progress, your own flow, and your own experience. As each path is one's own, we're going to have to arrive at our own conclusions. But at the same time, too, the same way these new systems are going to be rolled out are from the individual forward. So we're looking at more of a peer-to-peer perspective in which the idea itself is planted within the individual. And just like passing someone a seed, they can then allow that to blossom, grow, and nurture as long as it's given the proper environment and nutrition to actually flourish in the world. So what we're doing is providing seeds for individuals. And if you look on the internet itself, the same way that individuals were able to recognize that maybe more of these conglomerate news networks might not have the best sources of information, but then when you empower the individual by allowing them to have a network such as the internet, to build connections and to allow a voice to be heard, you remind individuals what potential exists, that we ourselves hold the power within our own hands, and that many of us are already taking actions. And those actions are going to inspire others to continue a journey that they've yet to even discover as of yet. Girl, girl. We love our animals.
What kind of dog you have?
German Shepherd.
Awesome.
Good guard dog.
Excellent.
Yeah. So when we're looking at a lot of the things that we could do as individuals, we're somewhat kind of up against a huge wall of thinking, wow, look as everything has come before us. What can we do to feel like we have the power? Many of us don't even realize it because they've been so conditioned, and many of us are even programmed unconditionally. And we look at these things, and as we kind of sit and witness them, sometimes we catch maybe more of a glitch that happens in that sort of system, that we recognize it's an illusion. And we recognize, wait, if this doesn't have to be, how do I truly feel about this? And that's where people are starting to turn within and actually dig out some of the good things that they've been lacking. We're kind of more going towards very dysfunctional, but more of a diagnostic test as a societal detox occurs, because we're removing the prime systems that has kind of kept everything going for so long. We're now realizing the contrast of what it's like without, so that we can greater appreciate what we have, while at the same time too recognizing maybe the fruits of our efforts and energies might not be there tomorrow. How do we change course? Many are going to try to preserve that old world the best they can because that's all they know of. But many who are curious, or at least willing to hear even locality of those that are exploring new alternatives, they're going to just trend, and that trend is what actually sparks each individual to share ideas with one another, to give new concepts, and that's the birth of innovation. Because I bet many of the new technologies that we'll develop are going to be developed more on an open source approach, or done in a sense out of passion. We're going to see new systems in place by blockchain alone that allows us to do more than we can do on our own, than the dependence we provided to institutions, which have not only failed to keep interest of those that they wanted to support, but to take it away in the means of something like what we're going through as of now, where the limitations and what you can and can't do is now being projected at such a wide level that if you're not repeating this same statement, you're being challenged, not just on a sense of individuals, but on an authoritative state. So now those who are looking for authority, or those who look and see the word official and take that as something that's so solid that it defines their reality, they're going to take that and run with it. Many of those individuals are still those individuals who haven't had a chance to just breathe, look, sit in that presence and realize what's around them and what they'd like to do. And that's why I always see this is a beautiful opportunistic time. As someone who is an artist, I see the creative potential. Artists get to see something arrive out of nothing, and that work you put into it is driven by those passions. So the fact that these individuals all probably have their own unique creativity that they can express, whether it's through the way of communication, or the way of a hobby, or even caring for a family through nurturing, or supplying other individuals with resources and assistance, they all play an integral role of a larger fractal onset in which we're not only changing the world we're going by, but we're redefining it by what we choose to allow our reality to be. So the power in itself is not even what the determination of the systems are telling us, but what we choose to create in that place. So we don't have to exist in a system. I know myself. I lived in a tiny house. I've switched my diet. I've been growing my own food for a couple of years. I'm taking these steps because I feel that not only they're proactive, but they're sustainable models in which I can apply my own power, action, and energy to invest in my own future, not for the sake of securing that future, but securing something that is promising for generations to come. So then when my children grow up and everything that comes into place, this is all unraveling to be something that I contributed, much like planting the seed of a tree, where you won't see the labors just yet, but you understand because of your connection and how deep you're able to perceive the understanding. That is its own gift to humanity. So I'll
Yeah.
wrap that up before it goes too lengthy.
No, that was very well said. And I have a lot of people who are, I know a lot of people who are absolutely stuck in the matrix of we can't change anything. It's all airy fairy stuff you talk about, Biggs. The
Hmm.
future is going to be controlled by the same people who have controlled us for the last 2,000 years. Uh, Case in point, my friend Dick Allgaier, who comes from a position of being used to the system, being
Hmm.
unknown about it. Then he learned about, for the last 3 years, he's learned about the control matrix, and his answer to that has been, there's nothing we can do, so we might as well get on their side. And I think that's a very defeatist position. I don't
Yeah,
think the
passive
younger,
almost.
yeah, I mean, he's stuck in a static world that even when the system falls apart, and I've talked about this a lot of times, we're going to have a decision to make when the system falls apart, because those who have controlled us for the last couple thousand years will not have the same power that they did. The most of their power comes from the unbacked fiat monetary system, the Federal
Hmm.
Reserve System, the control of money, and then everything flows from that.
And that's systematic too,
Yeah,
not purely by
absolutely.
the people giving their power away, which is its own
Absolutely.
thing.
And we have done that. I agree with Dick.
Mhm.
We have done that for the last 2,000 years. But over the past, I would say, 30 or 40 years, we've had a new generation grow up where they aren't as, with the internet, obviously, in the past 30 years, they're not as stuck into the control system. They've had more
Mhm.
freedom. They have a taste of freedom. They believe that they can do things outside of the system, and they want to do things outside of the system. I think over people who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, it's different. And I'm 55. I've been in
Mhm.
the system for a long time. It's hard for me to break out and break free of the old control system, because I know that they have set up so many booby traps for us to
Mhm.
rely on them. And when this next crash comes, it will be the mother of all crashes. We're in the bubble of all bubbles, the everything bubble, as I call it. And the crash is coming, but the key is not, how it will go down. That will happen organically, because it's built up so artificially and so big. The key is, what do we do after the crash? Do we turn to the guys like George Soros and Donald Trump and all the people who want to control our lives, think they know what's best for us? Or do we decide on an individual level, hey, wait a minute, now that all the debt is gone, we get to restart a new system. Who are we going to depend on? Clearly, we can't rely on, we can't trust the people who have destroyed the system we're living in. Clearly, we don't want that. So who are the people who are going to be deciding, whether or not we get implants, or whether or not we get an ID that follows us around everywhere we go, whether or not we allow our government to tell us to stay on lockdown? Who are they to decide that? And who are they to decide what I do with my life, what my neighbors do to make a living? I have people who have literally seen their small business, their small restaurant be destroyed before their very eyes, because the government told them they had to stay home. And that
Yeah,
is wrong. That
it
should
is.
never have happened. I get that this bioweapon is absolutely massively dangerous, but there's other ways to deal with it, as in, say, for example, giving people the choice,
Yeah,
having people decide whether they go to work or not. And as long as they know the risks. I mean, everybody's been told of the risks. Nobody's been told, that one, how to harden your body with things like vitamin C and chaga
yeah,
mushrooms, things like that. But that should be an individual's choice. Do I want to risk my health and the health of my family? I get how it spreads, for the economic viability of my family going forward. Because all this does is absolutely force humanity to turn toward their government for help, because the government is the one that laid down the decree that you're not allowed to go to work. You're not allowed to fend for yourself. You have to rely on this government. And when you get back to your job and we get back to the normal way of living, everything's going to be different. And everything will be, we're going to have another bailout for this, and we're going to have another bailout for that. And because the government told you to stay home, we're going to give you free money for as long as you need it. As long as we can stay in charge of the ones delving out the cash, they're fine with that. And they get votes and they get to control us even more and more. That's what we're going to have to decide. Do we take individual responsibility and say, screw you, government? Or do we say, okay, I got no hope, so I'm going to turn to you, Mr. Government? That's what they wanted all along. I think that's the key part of this thing that people aren't talking about right now, is the shift in who's going to run your lives. And we're starting to see little protests jump up in the United States, and I love that. And that is great, but it needs to be bigger. And I think when Trump put the governors in charge of opening in the states, it was a great thing, because all the governors get voted on by the people below them. If the people below them are seeing other states open up fast and real fast, if Trump was the decider, every governor, the Democratic governor around the country would say, oh no, we have to stay on lockdown. Now they're like, oh my God, these other states are kicking our ass. My people are mad at me. I'll never get voted back into office unless I get people back working. And oh, by the way, all our budgets are destroyed. What are we going to do about that? We got to get people back out there working. Crazy times. And but I think, I'm hoping that when we look back on all this, we'll tell ourselves it was crazy to do it in the first place. We should have relied on the individual to decide what they wanted to do. Give them all the information. I mean, there's so much false information about, what this bioweapon is it's insane. And the amount of deaths and the amount of people who have it or don't have it, nobody has the right information. But that's up to the people to decide. That decision should be in your hands, not the government's.
And that's what's always important, because we each are our own going through an experience. For someone else to dictate or provide us a means in confusion can be maybe a helpful gesture. But when that information and the sources of what their expertise is being sourced out of is only limited to the spectrum that truly exists out there, you need to question the source. In my take, I like to bring us back to all us being nature. And we're all fractally connected, and the same solutions that we're going to find outside the system are going to be the same solutions we find for our own health. In the way that we looked at Western medicine as this artificial injection, that their solutions are to add synthetic conglomerates of what they've decided to piece together to treat the issue, more like a Band-Aid rather than to treat it at the root. And like you've said for yourself, the Ayurvedic practices, these things are existing for centuries, if not thousands of years, in which this practice have not only been refined, but is just as much a valuable information that we can look towards the East for consideration of where we can implement what has worked. And then we can take the individual choice to apply that. My thing is that, like, I tell people, you want to improve your health, drop some acid. ACID. A, antiviral. C, vitamin C. I, immune boosting. And D, vitamin D. As you get all this inside your system, you're actually tending your own immune system, your body, to be a defense in which you're curing and taking care of your own garden. You're revitalizing the soil. And many of us don't realize that some of our health choices, some of our nutrition might not be ideal. And that has affected some of our own abilities to not only work with our own bodies, but the challenges that we might face day in and day out. The more we can address that and sit with that and understand and bring it to our awareness, that is the moment we start to invest in ourselves. And I don't know a single individual who has begun to make a choice to start putting their energy towards what they truly authentically feel and how they are expressing themselves in the world. Once they do that, they will go on a journey and always look back and realize the moment that changed that was them realizing they had the answers all along and they were the one they were waiting for. So as each individual implements these ideas, we're seeing movements similar to how we look on the internet in terms of peer-to-peer. We can see individuals with open source software, and they're putting the code out there so others can pick up on it, develop it, bring it further. And there's a whole case of individuals, just as much as they're individuals of governance cracking down on trying to censor or try to harvest your data. There's individuals that are promoting ways that you can protect your data, to become your own individual and to realize that these technologies are up to the individual. Anytime you're dealing with some sort of digital distribution, you're also dealing with the distribution of individuals participating on that. And that's a collective input. when you are dealing with all the different innovations and creativity that you then throw into that, you're dealing with some sort of powerful tea going on here that can really change the minds and hearts and souls of many individuals. And when you're challenged by a system where you had so much faith in, that is going to be challenged. And faith is one of the biggest things in which you want to have belief in the system or belief in yourself. When we take away the belief that we have in ourselves and what we can do, we really turn to systems. And I'll tell you, for the last century, we've dealt with at least 3 to 4 generations welcoming in and then accepting many of the restrictions in place, whether you look at the banking system and taking out the gold, the way we structure how we give power away, the way we actually promote the nutrition and health departments, the way we say what we can practice and can practice. And then at the same time, it's just like children. When you have children that fail to grow up on the foods that exist in reality, they don't consider that that potential is just as much as important to take in as the equation to improve something, rather than growing up and realizing it never existed at all. And I think we've been creatively chokeholded as a collective for centuries, that the idea to think for yourself or to do it on your own, to open source it, was always taken away because we don't, I don't say we as us, but we as a state, a nation, as a collective, however we want to express ourselves as a whole, we are going through something that is all being experienced through each individual. But we might pick up and feel what others are going through. So we can't escape the fact that part of us share this world together, part of us share this society together. We're going to be seeing a mix of the old world just as much as the new world. As I see individuals on the internet who are willy-nilly trying to invest in that old system just as much as those who are willing to build that new system. And that's why I see them existing simultaneously. When a forest burns down, some of it could be destroyed. And then in its place, you are provided brand new soil in which lush new growth, full of sulfur that will just give the plants full nutrients to pop up, reach for the sun, and give a clearing for a new day, a new dawn. And then when you implement aspects of nature that they can both exist at the same time, the idea of decay and creation, then you're looking at the best formula in the world, because that shows that potential is purely in the moment of presence. So while things are shifting away, we can take what's going away and transform it, much like the soil transforms many of the decaying organisms through the use of mycelium and mushrooms to take something that was this organic matter that held so strong for years and then transform it into something and bring it back into a new system where that in its turn is going to grow and birth something that many of us may not have ever seen coming. And that's the beauty of it, where the optimism needs to lie, because we cannot define what the future holds, but we can at least state that we, as creative potential individuals, can at least place a footprint on what that will be. So it really is coming down to actions, proactions, and being clear and as authentic as possible with yourself is always going to be the number one liberator for any individual, no matter faith system, where you want to do and even want to shift your world or implement something that you haven't even considered. Even breaking old habits are done through the key of awareness, integration, acceptance, and then being able to allow yourself to overcome and move forward. It's always a process. And just like the popping up of a forest, it will not happen overnight, nor differently than trying to invest in a garden. It takes years to realize where you fudged up and years to improve on maybe you didn't give enough consideration. But that learning curve, we learn from experience. And no differently than what's going on now, many of us are learning from the old systems that were there, as well as what it means when that system disappears. And that value we give away is now up to the individual. Do we continue to support that old system, or do we try to find alternative means and actions to where we source our energy, put our time towards, and decide what we want to be as human individuals? Are we the cogs in the machine that is built by individuals to keep us busy, or are we the ones that are willing to create and be the nature to give something that can blossom rather at an organic pace than to dictate it by the means of choices and decisions of a system that no longer really controls, but instead insists on where you should put your energy and time? So I think everyone question their own motives and actions to realize they have all the power they need.
It's very well said. And as a matter of fact, I had been thinking about that quite a bit. A lot of the people that I deal with, um, my customers on the road to Ruta, and we've been talking about this stuff for so long.
Mhm.
It is hard. You're right. It is difficult to. It seems like you're screaming into the wind sometimes, as you're like you can see the future as being different and better and
Mhm.
more inclusive, and all the we at some point when the old system ends, we're going to get a lot of assistance, I believe, um, from all the hidden technologies that our
Oh
government has
yeah.
kind of hidden away. And people don't see that as yet. I think they will very soon, as kind of a tailwind for us, those of us going against the grain, against screaming into the wind. We're going to get a tailwind from all these new technologies, that a lot of these things that sound like they'd be impossible to fix in our system environment, the monetary system,
Mhm.
the weather, the ways we get energy, the ways we grow food, all this stuff. It looks like it's really hard right now because they have their system in place, their system of just the newscasts. All the newscasts are literally on the side of the old system, keeping that old system in
Mhm.
place. It's required to make the old system, and the media and
Grasping
the
for
movie.
air.
It is exactly, it's crazy. But when that breaks down, when the old system breaks down, and I always get back to the money thing, you take the money out of their hands, they don't have the power that they do right now.
Mhm.
And that's the thing that has always been in the road to Ruta. The original documents out of the Fed has been they're going to blow the bubble so big and then make so big that it has to explode. I
Oh
think
yeah.
that's what's happening right now. So we're at that point where the explosion of the derivative market is the big thing that nobody's really talking about on the news yet. But well, oil prices go negative $40,
Mhm.
trillions of dollars were lost in the derivative market. Now, who held those derivative positions? It's the large banks, it's the large oil companies. You're going to see some really, really, really destructive things coming over the next couple months. That's a good thing because
Yeah.
it takes the control. If the monetary system breaks down, it takes the control of all the other stuff out of their hands. And hopefully, the good guys, as I call them, will release these technologies that can assist us in moving forward with some tailwind. I mean, we've been screaming into the wind for so long. We're
Mhm.
going to get some tailwind with these new technologies, a new monetary system, and all this stuff will help us so that that the changes you're talking about don't seem so far out there. They
Oh
do
yeah.
seem more achievable and a better outcome than what we had before.
And I think there is a beauty to that because you specifically hit it right on the head, is that this technology in itself not only is going to trigger in new methods and solutions that we were not capable of prior, but this is going to show others what it is. And I think this is coming in the same way that we can see, okay, so I have a news site, weekendworldnews.com, and I come across news sites and I curate the news. So one of the things I do see all the time is very much what you're talking about and is being done. And as we've seen in banks, you started to see like all these different banks and they're all coming into one company. And I think that's what you're seeing in a dying system, this coming together because they cannot support themselves anymore. And when you're seeing crisis, look at sanctions that were given on other countries. In even the US sanctions, they saw that as an opportunistic means that Russia themselves, in the decade alone, has decided to turn around their whole organic farming system so that they themselves become one of the highest producing organic farmers, or at least the sources of organic food in all the world. And when you're looking at how they can supply their own country, whether they're building up on their gold reserves or utilizing systems, they are deciding to opt out by using what is currently in their potential. Now, with any system whatsoever, you're dealing with the idea of construct. So, to understand construct, you look at the Western world of how things are put together, and we look at an idea of like science. Science has a hard time trying to introduce the idea of like these newer technologies, but science itself has been for years telling people certain modalities and models that don't exactly line up to the way things work in the outside world. This leads to confusion, and I think the more we bring about clarity and understanding who we are, and this happens within the same fields that these individuals are exploring, you're going to get alternative answers. And I think those answers are going to end up looking at the reality of one nature of our side is electric. It is this direct current from point A to point B in which we can drive a passion, while the other end of us is magnetic. We can sense, we can feel, we can take a wireless device and let that information reach another point without having a direct connection. So when you see these two modalities, you recognize how we can actually have these forces of nature that exist all without and around us be integrated by seeing a new understanding of, okay, if we have this more magnetic structure of feelings, then people might honor more their feelings and understand that this sense we are connected to of the world is just as important as our analysis of it. So we can have a direct connection towards it. But some of us make just as much progress by having a day where we just get lost in nature. And they end up by chance finding more out about themselves than the direct action of saying, I'm going to find out who I am. So we have to see that some of the solutions that will be garnered in, some may be accidental, some may be sparks of inspiration. At the same time, too, the more we're able to act as conduits of universe, nature, however you like to perceive this fractal connected of everything unraveling, whether we're sparked by the idea and don't fulfill it, someone else might be hit with that same idea and they bring it to reality because they want to honor it. And I think as we honor authenticness in our own selves, we bring out more of the unique nature we have. If we have a birch tree, you don't want it to act like an oak tree. You want to utilize that birch tree to the best it can be. And I think we start realizing each of us have our own contribution. We're going to start to see that the systems that we've been depending on for so long, not only, like I said, are going to be eclipsed, but they're going to be obsolete by some of the ways that we actually implement new ways of going about methods or ways of living, and even resources, the way we connect with one another. The idea itself that Facebook can be threatened by how well we connect, that they need to implement not only censorship, but what you control through your feed, as well as how much information is being shared with those individuals. That is a sign of fear. That is not a sign to improve technology, to garnish innovation, or to birth about ways in connecting individuals. We're recognizing that many of the systems in place, even on social networks, are built based off monetary gain, and they have been bought and sold out to not only produce more of this, but to specifically only grow these systems when they are improving that gain. If it's not about that, you see that's where you're lacking that heart and soul. So individuals who carry that, you're going to see moments on Facebook, no matter what they try to do, you'll still see people connect with one another because that human heart, that human connection, the way we actually are able to be these lanterns in the darkness for others can show that others can pick up on opportunities, ideas, and concepts just as much as they're exposed to it. And if you look at the education system or the, I'd say the primary food that you'd see in Western worlds, you're seeing a lack of depth because we try to hit things on a surface level, maybe try and fulfill the taste bud. But most of those achievements are done so out of just artificial synthetics that we are losing an aspect of what makes it what it is. So in exchange, do we want the experience to feel authentic like a VR headset? Or do we want to step into a world where we understand that this apple I'm biting into, the zucchini I'm cutting and growing in the back, these things are not only going to my body, but being something that we also create together. The fact that as we disconnect from the world, those who still are in this day and age during quarantine lining up at the McDonald's drive-through are at a challenge because I bet not a single one of them truly understand where their food is coming from or how easy it is to actually get access or to have your own food. But many of the individuals for generations grew up because parents have been working. There's been too much going on, and the confusion and chaos has only been increased over time to the point where our generation, even those of the millennial, are giving such a bad name because they've been, I guess, robbed of the guidance that could actually birth a new state. And that's why they're challenging the system in place. They opt out of it. I know I was one of these individuals that I can see what was going on. Even I was born in 90, and even at the age of 11, seeing the whole 9/11 shift in the way that the states took power, the way of means and abuse of how other individuals are swayed, even emotional manipulation as somebody who recognizes as a designer how much the like advertising industry really pressures people to plant ideas. So these things are not incapable, but the way that we recognize it and call it out what it is the moment we take a power away. So we see the advertisement, we see what they're trying to do, but then choosing by our own choice not to be a part of it or not to accept that as your own reality, you realize what's the case there. And then you become immovable by these programming methods, by the means that they can try to assert your power, because over generations of taking away potential and the ability to take consideration of what we can be has harnessed people, and it has held them back so much. And the more freedom you introduce people, it's telling people not to go out into the world and discover things, just to stay safe. But as soon as they do that, their minds open up, their hearts open up, and they learn something that they can't get from a system, that they can't go and visit. And then in 5 days of going through somebody talking, walk out of there with the same experience. Experience is one of the greatest methods in which we are always going to learn, grow, and continue to expand collectively, society, and individually. And it's kind of beautiful thing. I see life as a work of art. So it's just something where I connect how nature truly describes what's going on around us just by what we're seeing too, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. When you talk about food, it always brings me back to my wife Amy has done this cleanse. We went through a spiritual program with Christoph Melchizedek for
Mhm.
a year, and I loved it. I mean, it
Yeah.
was all new to me. It was all brand
Yeah.
new. The second month of it is a raw food cleanse, where you
Mhm.
do 1 week of raw vegetables, and that's all you're eating. And that's the way that nature made them. One
Yeah.
week
Yeah.
of raw smoothies, you just take that stuff and you throw it in a blender, and then 1 week of raw juices, where you just squeeze the juice and the minerals and all the sustenance out. I had never felt so clear in my head and in my
Mhm.
body in every aspect, and it did cover every aspect. It wasn't just the food part of it,
Yeah.
and it was mental clarity and so many things were opening up. And then I go off it, and like right now in this lockdown thing, it's hard to do a raw food reboot cleanse, but it
Yeah. Yeah.
can be done.
Yeah.
um and
Even a
Amy's
shift in diet too. People notice that as they take sugars out their diet, or certain things that have been so, I guess, overkilled in the Western diet, that as soon as you start to even step out of it, your body changes. You adapt. You have a lot more to work with. And as you source more nutrition from more of an organic source instead of a nutrition or maybe a surface level stimulant, you whole mindset changes, because you're giving yourself different fuel for your vehicle to process everything, to go through life, and to maybe even take in consideration like a brand new point of view. Unless you hit that point of view, you would not have had that. So it's a process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, with Amy's, she put up a website. It was all free.
Mm.
It's called the Raw 21 Reboot, and it has recipes that you can actually make good, really good
Oh
food
yeah.
through. I mean, she's a very good cook, so she's making these wraps out of like dried beet wraps instead of a tortilla and all this stuff. And it was amazing to me. You can eat well, you can feel better, and then I mean, for me, it keeps going. Why do I go back? Why do I keep going back to the old way I used to eat? And I know I'm going to feel worse. I know I do feel worse. Like right now,
Mhm.
I'm ready for a new reboot. And I told Amy, I go, I want to do one now. We got to get into it. And she said, well, it's going to be hard for a lot of people around the country because of the availability of fresh vegetables and things like that. We'll do one in the spring. And I'm like, there's nothing stopping me. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
be a whole group doing it. It for me, it's going to take a change of mindset, a permanent change of mindset, not just temporary, not just, okay, I feel better now, so I'm going to go out and have a couple slices of pizza and a beer, that type of thing.
Mhm.
And I see that as I progress. I've done this reboot 3 times. Every single time, the same result. I feel better. I feel healthy, and my mind is clear. And I can go down different avenues that I hadn't gone down before. And like you said, it's the fuel. I feel like
Mhm.
right now, I feel like an old diesel truck that's having problems climbing up the hill. Whereas when I eat, at the end of the raw food thing, you feel like a Ferrari that's speeding around the racetrack. And
Yeah.
I need to change the way I feel about that. It's not a one-time thing for to lose weight or just to feel better. It should be a life thing so that you can truly lead the kind of life you were built to lead. I mean, it's raw food, meaning God
Mhm.
provided us this food to eat as a source of nutrition, why do we have to mess with it? Why do we have to stick it in synthetic, different synthetic forms? And our body doesn't like that. Our body doesn't
Mhm.
respond to it the way it does with the real deal, the real food that nature created.
Well, not only that, but many of these synthetics take out primary nutritions that over a period of time we end up just removing from the body due to just how much of a habit we take in some of the foods we have. If somebody was to truly assess their diet and break it down, you can go out and have a beer and pizza, but then understand how you can complement that so that your body are taken care of. But I tell this to my dad a bunch of times. He's 10 years older than you, and he's implementing different methods here and there. And he tells me the same way. Trying to implement it is always harder. So I tell him, find a gradual approach where it's already in the habits of what you're doing. For example, those who could use anti inflammatory boosts, you adding a little bit of turmeric in your food, in your diet, don't even realize you're taking it in, but little minor things, ways of supplementation. I always find that if, let's say, you didn't get a well balanced diet or you came into contact with a lot more people, that would, even before this whole epidemic hit, is an idea to say, all right, maybe you should boost this as you are aware of your environment, what you went through, and what you're lacking. So if you recognize that and you are aware of it, you not only self educate, but then you're becoming able to process a lot more. You realize that you're not as bogged down and you're giving yourself a lot more to work with. Think about the idea of B12. B12 is a supplement, or it's not a supplement itself, it's a building block in which can regenerate your own cell. So if your body can regenerate and you can provide it the building blocks necessary to do so, then you yourself are capable of taking a garden that even in the most barren of soil can be revitalized by the right bacteria, by the right nutrition, by the right sources. And what's beautiful is that we have a rich planet all over the world, growing all sorts of foods, roots, and stuff that we don't even realize exist. For example, if we're lacking out on a vitamin C, if there was ever a dilemma you can't get it, look into the maca maca powder. Maca maca is a high source of vitamin C that you will find in nature. So just as much as we can look for supplementation for vitamin C, we can look that many of the nutritions we desire or our bodies can use can be sourced from nature. I know I have a mostly vegan diet, but like you said with your wife, to have a vegan approach requires just as much to know how to cook, what you're doing, and the nutrition of a balanced diet. Without that, you're going to probably rob yourself of half the nutrition that your body needs to begin with, that you're approaching many of your diet shifts based off more of a superficial shifting rather than one that is integration based off what you need or where you're at. So taking something and gradually implementing it not only develops good habits, but it allows you to implement something and then see over time how it improves the situation. I know for me, I shifted a whole diet, but it's a gradual thing. I went from eating fast food, I'll stop at each of the drive-throughs, stack it all up, and eat it in one sitting, to realizing that water is great for you. And then from there, shifting things to organic and then sourcing things well. So if I still eat meat, I went to grass-fed. And then from there, it shifted towards all right, I feel like I don't need this as much, or I don't need this much, or I understand that I can source this and this. And that shifts it up altogether. So now my diet consists of having one smoothie a day on top of all my other meals. But in that smoothie, what I can add my chaga mushrooms, I can add all my other mushrooms, I can add my maca powder, my cacao, my camu camu, I can add elderberry, you name it. There's all these sources around the world. But then you put into a smoothie, you drink it, it tastes like a frosty from Wendy's. You don't even know how good just having that in your body gives to everything, because we can't understand what it's like to be a cell just as much we can't understand what it's like to be an individual influencing how the collective's unfolding. So we can only take part at the individual level. Just like as cancer can grow in a cell where the pH level is imbalanced, we can take action on that individual cell to provide it what it needs to not only change its course, but to provide itself the tools necessary to overcome the challenges. And at that same time, too, without that challenge taking place, that whole learning curve of what is necessary for that body to know what it needs would not have even come to awareness. So many of us are going to face crisis, hardships, and many challenges that we might not have the answers for. But many of those answers are going to be found either by going within or providing us lessons by either learning the hard way or acting much sooner to honor the authentic selves that we offer. Because many of us can lie and tell ourselves that what we're doing is for this reason. But when it wears you down and breaks you down and you don't have the energy to move forward, that question of where you put that time and energy towards is going to come back full hold. And when you realize that you put all this in, you want to keep that system, just like the system that is phasing out as we speak. People will fight for it. And those who are going to go out screaming and grasping for that last air, they're not going to enjoy the process because they're not ready to look within. They're not ready to transform or to recognize potential, just as much as celebrity status in the world is being endangered by the amount individuals are giving them attention, that they utilize their names just to be like, oh, we're home. But the thing is, that offers up people the opportunity to recognize the disillusion that these are individuals and how much power you give away to them to recognize that status. And many of the power structures that we all are accepting of come from ourselves giving it away. So as soon as that goes away, you yourself change your modality of living, that you don't need to do it for others, but for you, you recognize your power is not going away. You recognize where your energy goes. And that's being conscious and aware. So I know a talk I did years back is it's about conscious consumption. Where do you source your stuff from? Whether it's the news, the media, your food, and even your activities and energy, what you take in, you kind of also promote. And at the same time too, even if it subconsciously carries with you, is that something that will move forward and be beneficial? And I think there's just as much as a talk to make improvements as there is talk to just relax. As I recognize the East perspective of yin and yang, that just as much proactive action you need to be receptive, relax, and rejuvenate. Many of us affect our immune systems by not having enough sleep. And that is one of the biggest things that we are so susceptible to undermine ourselves based off the priorities that we hold in other people's pressures. So I think as we grasp and gather our own time and energy back, that's where the huge shift of everything is going to take place, whether it's financial and whether we want to become empowered by taking the financial system into our own hands, by investing in our own crypto into a trustless system where we don't have to bank on something that is purely by the standards of printing. So I always say that you can't make art of huge value if it's by the creator, because if you put it as a blockchain, you can't sell the concept as an idea. It's the value of the construct. Anyone can recreate that. So the concept and ideas are impermanent. That is the beauty of it all, that if we can take that idea and realize that many of the systems are merely just constructs of ideas that we can put together, the same way that those systems have been put in place are the same way that we're going to implement brand new ways of living. And like I said, it's going to happen in a very decentralized manner from the inside out. And this is kind of just, like I said, a very funked up diagnostic test for nations, for states, governance, people in power, to see where they stand, to see where their resources are, but even down to the minute level of an individual, recognize where they stand. Are they in a good position, or have they been depending too much on a paycheck to paycheck to support something that might not even be a realistic and practical pursuit? And has that been influenced by the desire based off what we take in as a culture, as media, or even the idea of what the American dream can be? Or do we want to step out of that idea together and just realize that we're all each individuals having so much potential? And if you allow that to play, you're going to see things never before seen because of interactions that could not have taken place otherwise. Yeah, going off on that one, but it's
No, I
just so many ideas here.
I
Yeah.
love it. And it's funny because I mean I didn't know you before now.
Mhm.
You did some artwork for me, and you said I could use it. I was like, yeah, this is awesome artwork. I've used it, but we haven't discussed anything. And just listening to you, I have this image in my head of like a young Cliff High. I mean,
I
that's
can
I mean,
relate to that. I can probably go toe to toe with him because I understand his level of even webbot predictive nature is just as much a nature of using emotional divination to utilize your sources to have an interpretation and provide useful information. So his webbot, I actually recognize seen in more esoteric works like tarot divination or astrology, where it's not the data itself that is going to tell you, but it's the interpretation from having a very well-rounded perspective. And I think many artists inherently have this within them, which is why they have that creative approach to things. But yeah, this talk, that's why I say things can go deep if they allow it.
Yeah. Hey, we don't have much time left, but let everybody know. I know a lot of my people want to know how to get in touch with you, how to see your work and things like that. Um, tell us how to be more connected, and you have a YouTube channel and your art and things like that. Let us know how to find Eric TC.
Okay, so I'm kind of like all over the place, but if you want to just look at one place, it's my website, Eric TC. It's my name. You'll probably find and get the spelling corrected through the title of this video wherever you see it. So it's ERICTECCE.com. That will take you there. You'll see my YouTube videos. You'll see posts from artwork. You can see previous stuff I've done. You'll have access to my studio work. You can see my news website from there. You can see so much stuff. So explore it as you desire. You'll see contact if you want to reach out. I'm a very vocal individual, and I'm looking to be more vocal. So I hope to actually birth more conversations out of this, because discussions can go a long way for individuals to recognize what potential truly exists. So hey, if
That's
it
awesome.
helps, I'm all for it.
That's great. And everybody, go check out Eric's work. And hey, thank you so much for the time you spent with my people on the Road to Ruta. We're always looking for new things to think about, new ways to think about the unfolding of year zero. And you definitely brought a lot to the table. So thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. Like I said, I did the artwork for you because in my state of mind, I'm like, who's in a position to creatively express something that is just so out there and so ahead of its time? Let's dive in. And that's kind of my journey. So to even create those arts or work, I recognize the value, the time to see how individuals can be ahead of their time. And that doesn't mean they have to fit in, but the ideas and the concepts that they offer, it's beautiful to see how just simple ideas can change the world. So let that be.
All right. Hey, let's get together again soon.
No
And
doubt.
you absolutely have fun out there. Keep doing what you're doing. We're gonna get your name out there as much as we can. I'll talk to my crypto people and say, hey, you gotta interview Eric, and we'll move on from here. So thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Bex, for the time and the opportunity, as always.
All right. Take care.
You too.